And so in this video today though, I want to focus on grain quality, dent, the color of the grain. You know, you get questions about the starch, soft starch, hard starch, you know, endosperm. These are all these different terms that come up when we talk about grain quality, test weight, right? And then ultimately, I think for most of us in the business, you know, yield is that ultimate measure in terms of success for a hybrid. Okay, so, you know, in Texas and of course anywhere that we grow corn, the growing season dictates a lot of what we get as an end product. And I want to walk you through several of those aspects here in this video. Okay, so again, we're going to focus on grain quality, and let's get busy.
There's a white hybrid on the right, and then we've got on the left what I'm going to call two number 2 yellow grain hybrids. Distinct differences in grain color. If you look at the two yellows, you know, one is much darker, deeper orange in its grain color compared to the other one. But to me, these are right out of the gate some easy indicators in terms of just overall grain quality and test weight. Oftentimes when I see grain like this hybrid here on the left, that's deep orange color, very little dent, for example, you know, this is a hybrid that's almost always going to have high test weight and will always be associated with having excellent grain quality. And that hybrid to the right, in comparison, right, this one here in the middle, does have a lighter yellow cast to it. It's just a little bit rougher along the surface or the caps of the kernels. And I can tell you it will be lighter in test weight. Sometimes you need to break these ears open, because sometimes you'll get a cap that's lighter yellow in color, but you break that ear open and you'll have actually some nice orange in there. So, you know, you need to kind of you know, break these ears open and really evaluate all the way through. Just because I'm focused on grain quality and I'm kind of indicating that, hey, this one's not quite as good as the ear on the left, the hybrid on the left, does not mean that this is a bad hybrid. In fact, for its maturity, this is one of our highest yielding hybrids, and it makes up for a little bit lower test weight with much larger kernels. Just because one hybrid may not have as high quality as the next one doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad hybrid. Most farmers are telling me it's yield, yield, yield. And of course they're going to also look for characteristics that matter agronomically. But it's almost always yield. That's their first indicator on what they're going to use on their farm. Now this hybrid on the right, pretty special hybrid, probably one of our best-selling white hybrids in all of North America. People who grow this hybrid have a market use for this. They have an end-use market. We typically refer to it as food grade, exceptional test weight, exceptional grain quality, and again it goes into chips, tortillas in general, just a lot of food uses for this. This hybrid on the left can also be yellow food grade candidate, and of course you know, again, I'm looking at that beautiful high quality grain, and that's what the end use people are looking for, you know, as a hybrid that meets their characteristics, you know, for high test weight, clean grain. You know, so you've got 3 hybrids here, all showing very different characteristics in quality, color, and overall yield performance, of course. But that's just kind of a beginning look at the visual differences that farmers oftentimes will use to kind of gauge what the quality of their grain is going to be. All right, now let's take these 3 ears. I'm gonna set this white ear aside, and I'm gonna break open you know, both of these ears here. Let's do this on camera real quick. Try to evaluate the back side of the kernel. Okay. And you know, the other side, okay, so this side, you know, when you've got agronomists out in the field, you know, we're all getting, you know, really specialized here, but you know, this would be what we call the embryo side. It's a little bit harder, a little more difficult to evaluate grain from that side. So we tend to take the tip side and evaluate a hybrid like that, okay? So, you know, again, this is the hybrid that's a little bit lighter yellow in color and some nice kernel depth on a red cob, but you can kind of see too that you know, that light yellowish cast kind of extends down through the kernels as well. Okay, so again, this will be a 57 pound test weight, and again, high yielding hybrid. But now let me set that aside And now let me take this, deep orange. Again, you don't see much dent to the kernels. That's an indicator of some very hard endosperm, hard starch type that's laid into the kernels on this particular hybrid. Okay. I'm going to break this one open. Now again, I've got a pink cob, a bigger cob. And again, I don't like the embryo side. It's not that I can't figure anything out from that, but I'm going to set that aside. And so now we, kind of get a nice look at the uniformity of the orange, the color down through the kernels, okay? So again, it's just another indicator going from the caps, right? Going from the caps, looking at the color, and then making sure that indicator of high grain quality is going to extend down through the kernels, and you have to do that by breaking open the ears and taking a look. So again, high yielding hybrid, just a different quality of grain compared to this hybrid here in my left hand. And again, a lot of rows around on this. This is just an exceptional hybrid, but still, we're going to focus on grain quality here and not get too carried away on other stuff. But again, you love that deep orange color. Growers like that as well, but again, it's all about yield. And again, I won't take anything away from this hybrid here that's a little bit lighter in test weight, a little bit lighter yellow in its color, and a little bit maybe overall lower grain quality. Still exceptional and has a place on a lot of acres. Okay, now let me just set these two aside, and let me take this white hybrid now. Okay, we're going to break this one in half. And that took some effort, but that's a big old cob, deep kernels. Again, this is a high yielding white hybrid, lovely depth to the kernels, and you can just see how uniform, the white color is all the way through the kernel. And I tell you, when you see a wagon or a truckload full of this, it's just absolutely stunning. It's just a wagon full of white pearls. So this is, again, an excellent food grade quality hybrid, white grain. And you can't just grow this anywhere. You've got to have a contract and you've got to have a place to go with it. But these are things that we look for in grain quality. So if I put all three of these together, and some very distinct differences, again, in the color, and again, perhaps subtle differences in grain quality. So I'm going to take 3 tactical flashlights. What I'm going to do is put an individual kernel on each lens, and then I'm going to surround each kernel with some clay. And the point of that is so that when I turn the flashlight on, let the light come through, the only light that can come through is going to come through the corn kernel. Previously, I talked about hard endosperm, soft endosperm, light yellow colors and things like that. So one of the things that breeders and agronomists like to do, when we're out there looking at mature corn, we'll take a kernel and we'll kind of hold it up to the sky. I know you're kind of wondering what's going on with that, but really what we're trying to do is just see how much light comes through the kernel. And a corn kernel that is very high in test weight, very high in hard endosperm, will let a lot of light come through, and that is an excellent indicator of high test weight and high grain quality. So we're going to hold that kernel, not right at the sun of course, but kind of off pretty close so we can get as much light, or at least try to see how much light can come through that corn kernel. And now what I'm doing here in the classroom then is I'm going to simulate that. So what I've done on those 3 hybrids that you were looking at, I'm going to take an individual kernel, I'm going to lay it on the lens of the flashlight, and then I'm going to turn the light on. And so then we're going to get up close. And what's so neat about this, again, is you can simulate the sun. So here is a corn kernel that little bit lower test weight. So this is the one that's around 57, 58. Now if you notice in the middle and at the cap of the kernel, not as much light is coming through. That is softer starch or softer endosperm that prevents, it's more opaque, it's not allowing as much light to come through. Now if you look at the outside edges of that corn kernel, a lot of light's coming through, in comparison. And if you look at a lot of corn hybrids, on the outside edges of the kernel is where the harder endosperm or horny endosperm to get technical. That's where most of that is laid in. It is translucent in nature. It's very hard, very dense, and so it allows more light to come through. Kernels that have more of that throughout the whole kernel tend to have very high test weight, tend to have very little dent actually in the cap, and tend to be associated with very high quality grain. So let me turn that off. And again, good grain quality. Again, you know, we talk about yield and things like that. So this is not the end of the world if one's a little more opaque versus another. Okay? Now let's take a look at this one. So let me get zoomed in here. This corn kernel is allowing, at least from what I see, a lot more light coming through on the sides. And so this is a corn kernel that's coming from the hybrid that's got that 61, 62 pound test weight. Again, you just see a lot more light coming through the sides, more towards the top. Again, if you were to hold this up close to the sun, you're going to get the same effect. And again, you're looking at a really high test weight, high grain quality kernel. Love the deep orange color. Again, not a lot of dent. Of course, I've got that clay, you know, kind of molded in around the outside edges of it. That prevents a lot of light escaping so that only the light can come through the corn kernel. Now let's try it with the white corn. Now this is a little bit bigger lens. And again, if you remember what I was saying about this white corn, very high test weight. We love it for, you know, the quality of the grain. And now look at that. That's just like a little miniature light bulb. It almost looks like just a, well, not transparent, but a translucent sheet of glass. And that is just an excellent indicator. Now that little V at the bottom, that's the embryo, right? So we talked about the back side of the kernel versus the embryo side. So that embryo is a relatively soft material. The light won't come through that nearly as well. High test weight, hard kernel, little to no dent, and just exceptional grain quality. Okay, so again, you're gonna you know, simulate this or emulate this by going out on a sunny day, and basically you're gonna take a corn kernel and kind of hold it up, not right at the sun, but off to the side, and you can evaluate. And after a while, you're gonna be able to see differences between hybrids. And so it's an end-use market, and you know, where's this grain gonna go, and just how important are these characteristics. So with all that, I hope that's just a good lesson on grain quality, and hope you've enjoyed. And I challenge you to get out in the field and start learning and holding those kernels up.